What's going on, guys? Today, we're going to explore together one of the most insane and terrifying stories, a Superman from a universe born from darkness and destruction, where hope is nothing but a distant luxury. That is the Kal-El of the Absolute Universe, also known as Absolute Superman. On one fateful day, when Absolute Superman had become the last symbol of resistance of a fallen Earth, everything he had built was wiped out in the blink of an eye. Not by physical force, not by an army of parademons, but by an entity taking the form of a human being, dressed in a pristine white suit, with a courteous smile but completely hollow eyes. He called himself the Reconciler, an agent of the very gravity of the multiverse. He did not come to fight. He came to repossess Kal-El's contract of life. And in the darkest moment, when Absolute Superman, with all of his overwhelming power, threw a punch capable of cracking a planet, that fist stopped. Not because it was blocked, but because the very concept of impact had been stripped away from the space surrounding him. In that moment, we realized a horrifying truth. The greatest enemy of Absolute Superman was not a monster, but the embodiment of a cold and indifferent cosmic law, something that not even the willpower of a man of steel could shake. And that was only the tip of the iceberg known as absolute power. To understand why a Superman, who was already the pinnacle of strength, could face an adversary that surpassed every limit of power, we are not talking about a Superman weakened by kryptonite or magic. We are talking about Absolute Superman, a version of Kal-El born from the very furnace of the oppressed working class on Krypton, who grew up on an Earth without justice, without kindness, a world where he had to use his fists to fight for every last fragment of hope. In DC history, this is a reality depicted in the Absolute Universe series. This is a universe where heroes do not have the privileges we once knew. Krypton was not a cold, scientific paradise destroyed by natural disaster. Here, Krypton was a brutally stratified planet where the elite lived in luxury, while the working class, like Kal-El's parents, were treated as slaves. And when Krypton exploded, it was not because the planetary core collapsed, but because a resource war between ruthless corporations had annihilated the entire world. Kal-El, the last child of Krypton, did not carry with him the hope of building a better world. He carried the flame of rage, an iron will to survive, and one burning question. Absolute Superman's own voice echoes through his journal entries, a monologue filled with fury. I did not come here to be a lighthouse. I came to be the fire that burns down the towers of the oppressors. On this earth, they do not need a god. They need a nightmare for those who created injustice. I lost everything. My birth parents in the Kryptonian Civil War. My adoptive parents in a mining accident covered up by the owners. Everything I ever loved was crushed beneath the wheels of greed, and I remained alone with the power to level everything. This is the psychological starting point for the character's journey. Absolute Superman's motivation is not to protect the status quo, but to tear it apart. And for that very reason, his greatest enemy is not someone who wants to dominate the world, but a force that seeks to maintain cosmic order in an absolute and ruthless manner. When you hear me say that this enemy is powerful enough to render Absolute Superman helpless, that is no exaggeration. Darkseid, in this universe, is nothing more than a common tyrant trapped in a war with New Genesis. Brainiac is just an outdated computer program, but the Reconciler is an entity that comes from the source wall itself, the wall that encircles the entire multiverse. He represents neither good nor evil. He represents absolute balance, a form of mechanical fate, where every action has a pre-calculated reaction. He does not merely break the laws of physics. He is the one who writes them. An Absolute Superman, with all the chaos and free will that he represents, is simply a variable that must be eliminated from the equation. All right, and this is truly the most insane part. We are going to tell this in a linear sequence, covering the battle between Absolute Superman and the Reconciler, along with an extremely important flashback from his very own childhood to explain the origin of his psychological strength and extraordinary willpower. Metropolis, but not the glamorous metropolis of gleaming skyscrapers. This is the metropolis of the Absolute Universe, a suffocating city, divided by walls separating the rich from the poor, where smoke and ash from the factories of the Lazarus Corporation blanket the sky. Absolute Superman, wearing rough Kryptonian armor inherited from the working class, has just destroyed the headquarters of a corporation that poisoned the water supply of an entire district. He stands atop the rubble, breathing in the air of victory and rebellion. But at that very moment, the atmosphere shifts. Every sound suddenly vanishes, as if someone had hit the mute button on the world. Stepping out from the void comes a man in a white suit, gloved hands, his face as perfect as a wax sculpture, The reconciler does not speak, but words appear as if carved directly into the space surrounding him. Kal-El of Krypton, laborer number 734. A. You have violated Clause 7, Section C of the Law of Cosmic Balance. Interference with the predetermined self-destruction of a civilization. Your existence is a compilation error in the source code of reality. Your life contract will be revoked. We need to cut to an important flashback here, going back to Kal-El's childhood to explain why he possesses such an iron will. Many people mistakenly believe that Superman's power comes from the yellow sun. That is true, but for absolute Superman, the true source of his strength also comes from somewhere else: righteous fury. From the time he was a child who had just landed on Earth, taken in by a poor mining couple in the Appalachian region, young Kal witnessed his adoptive parents being exploited to death by their employers in a mine collapse. There was no gentle Jonathan Kent with moral lessons out in the cornfields. There was only the brutal truth that justice does not exist on its own, but must be seized through blood and tears. And the key detail, the one that few people notice, is that young Kal-El traced the clues of his own origins not from a magnificent fortress of solitude, but from a damaged spacecraft, carrying scattered recorded fragments left by his birth father Jor-El, a lowly engineer in the machinery of Krypton. Those recordings did not speak of a savior. They spoke of a failed experiment in creating an infinite energy source for the proletariat. Kal-El was a part of that experiment. His power is the result of a combination of working-class genetics and solar energy, producing a being who is not only physically powerful, but also possesses a willpower that cannot be broken. This explains why, when facing the Reconciler, an entity capable of stripping away every law of physics, Absolute Superman still stands firm. Let us analyze this for a moment. Why is Absolute Superman a threat to destiny itself? Other heroes fight for peace. Absolute Superman fights for radical change. He does not represent vague hope, but represents revolution. The Reconciler, as an agent of the Source Wall, only intervenes in events that shake the very foundation of the multiverse. The existence of a being with absolute free will like Absolute Superman, a being who refuses every predetermined fate, is essentially a virus to the rigid order system of the universe. Compared to the standard version of Superman, that Superman is a mirror reflecting the best of humanity. But Absolute Superman is a mirror reflecting the rot of an entire system, and he is the surgical blade used to cut it away. Other heroes like Batman can plan for every situation, but Absolute Superman is different. He is the unexpected situation itself, one that no cosmic plan can ever anticipate. The moment that I personally believe is one of the most insane displays of willpower in the history of comics. The battle between Absolute Superman and the Reconciler, the agent of the Source Wall. After the proclamation of life revocation was made, Absolute Superman did not back down at all. He gritted his teeth, a defiant smirk spreading across his face. He spoke, his voice growling like the engine of an industrial machine. A compilation error, a contract being revoked. I have spent my entire life watching your contracts and laws grind innocent people into dust. You call that destiny. I call that a crime. And if your universe was built upon that injustice, then I will smash it apart and rebuild it from the ground up. Immediately, the Reconciler raised his hand. There were no energy beams, no explosions. Instead, the very space surrounding Superman began to be deconstructed. The colors of reality were stripped away, leaving nothing but a blank white void. The laws of physics such as gravity, friction, and time were all nullified. Absolute Superman was left suspended, with no foothold, no direction, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. This was not an attack, but an erasure of existence. But what did Absolute Superman do? He did not even attempt to fly. He closed his eyes. And then, the unthinkable happened. From somewhere deep within him, an energy that belonged neither to matter nor to concept surged forth. It was the painful history of Krypton, the cries for help from miners trapped underground, the memories of his adoptive parents who had died unjustly. Superman did not resist the destruction with strength. He did something 1,000 times more terrifying. He merged with the very source code of that destruction and refused to be compiled. The blank white void began to crack, and from those cracks, the deep crimson of the Kryptonian cape began to spread outward, like blood flowing back into a body that had already died. He screamed, "I am not a line of code for you to rewrite. I am a human being." The true climax arrived when the Reconciler personally charged forward. He transformed his arm into a blade of absolute truth, something capable of severing every causal link, every narrative, every form of existence. But when the blade made contact with Superman's chest, where his heart was beating, it could not pierce through. not because his skin was too hard, but because at the point of impact, the very definition of truth had been altered. To the reconciler, truth was order, but to absolute Superman, truth was the unceasing struggle. His willpower had challenged and redefined the very weapon of his opponent. This is the greatest moment, because we witness a shift in the perception of the universe itself. The reconciler, a being who had never known emotion, for the first time displayed confusion. He could not comprehend why a finite creature was able to resist the infinite. He came to realize that absolute Superman was not a variable to be eliminated, but a new constant of creative chaos itself. A surreal scene unfolded. Superman, radiating a deep crimson and amber glow reminiscent of an industrial furnace, stood defiant in the middle of the void, and the void itself began to shrink before his presence. He had not defeated the reconciler through violence. He had proven that his own existence was a truth, greater than all the laws that governed it. Let me emphasize this once more, so you truly understand the sheer scale of what happened. Even a Green Lantern ring can only generate constructs based on willpower within a limited range. But absolute Superman used his own life, his own pain, to forge an entirely new reality within the heart of his adversary. The outcome of this confrontation did not end with the death of the reconciler. He cannot die. It ended with the first retreat in the entire history of his existence. He did not leave because he lost a battle of strength, but because he realized that Kal-El's life contract contained a clause that even he himself could not erase: the right to rebel. The consequences of this battle were not complete liberation for Earth, but a transformation in the very nature of Superman himself. He was no longer just a rebellious warrior. He had become a cosmic symbol of resistance. At the lowest point of defeat, when it seemed as though he was about to be erased entirely, Superman did one thing. He returned to the slum where his adoptive parents had died, and used his own two hands to rebuild a school for orphan children. This is the emotional payoff, the moment where we come to understand the deeper meaning behind all of this power. Absolute Superman is the embodiment of the dream of those left behind, those who believe that justice does not come from glamorous institutions, but from their own solidarity and struggle. The Jonathan Kent of this version did not leave behind a farm, but a pair of miner's gloves caked in coal dust. His moral lesson was not be a good person, but never kneel before anyone. The power of absolute Superman is not dangerous because it can destroy planets, but because it empowers the most ordinary of people. It challenges the very concept of power and order. Is the power of absolute Superman more dangerous than cosmic entities? The answer is yes, but in a way you would never expect. Entities like Darkseid or Brainiac are embodiments of visible oppression. They are dangerous, the way a dictatorship is dangerous. But absolute Superman represents invisible instability, a revolution that cannot be extinguished. His danger lies in the fact that he cannot be assimilated or controlled. He is the greatest fear of any totalitarian system, whether it belongs to mankind or to the gods. He can liberate a planet in the morning, and by the afternoon, the very truth of that absolute freedom will send an entire galactic empire into chaos. That is why, in the issues that follow, the writers do not attempt to restrain his physical power, but instead challenge his beliefs and his willpower. Can he build a new world without losing himself in the process? This will serve as the premise for the stories ahead, where each of his victories not only frees people from their chains, but also places upon his shoulders the responsibility of a builder. Could there come a day, after he has destroyed every enemy, when absolute Superman himself becomes a new authoritarian figure, a lord with an iron will who rules through fear? A teaser for you. In an alternate reality, a desperate absolute Superman used the very hands that had fought for freedom to warp reality itself, turning Earth into a perfect prison, a place with no crime, but also no freedom. Sometimes the greatest forces are the invisible ones of fate and order, and the greatest hero is the one who dares to stand up and say no, even when facing the Creator itself. Absolute Superman is not merely the most powerful metahuman, not merely a Kryptonian, but the embodiment of an indomitable spirit that will never yield to injustice, a true hero of the proletariat. And now, I want to hear from you. What do you think? Or in your opinion, could the rage of absolute Superman be the catalyst for a new era of DC Studios following the multiverse crisis? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. If you found this story interesting and want us to explore more of these metaphysical villains, do not forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. And if you want to support us even further, so we can produce in-depth analysis videos like this one every week, come visit us. Thank you all for being here, and I will see you in the next cosmic story. Peace out.